Hello and welcome to our podcast, Moon and Sagi.
I'm Bedir, aka Moon,
I'm Ryan, aka Sagi.
and this is a conversation about TMZ calling Britney Manic. So, TMZ published a video of Britney at a restaurant, and their headline was basically saying that she was having a meltdown, she was acting manic, and in the video, you can see her being disturbed by the diners around her trying to take videos of her. And she used the menu to cover her face because she doesn't want to be filmed. And in the audio, you hear like it's unclear what she's saying, but it kind of sounds gibberish. And that was posted on the internet, and people lost it. And, to my surprise, they were actually in defense of Britney. But in the process of people defending her, a lot of things were said about mania and bipolar that didn't sit well with me. Basically, people were comparing instances of like Jamie Lynn with the knife situation to Britney and saying, "Oh, look, the headline with Jamie Lynn, they weren't calling her manic. If this isn't manic, then what is?" And that just didn't sit well with me because it was kind of like they're throwing disabled people under the bus as per usual. And yeah, basically that happened. And then someone today reversed the audio in that clip. And it seemed like TMZ themselves reversed it to make Britney sound like she was speaking gibberish. And in the reversed version, you can hear someone saying, "Oh, this is Britney Spears." And then you can hear Britney saying, "I'm trying to get away." Also, Sam Asghari left the restaurant while Britney was still there. And obviously that was framed as him storming out, but that wasn't the case. He then, shortly after, clarified that he was leaving to get the car. I'm assuming the car was parked a bit far away. So what do you think about TMZ basically kind of going back to the way they used to report about Britney in the past, kind of replicating that the same way in today's time? What do you think about that?
No surprises. That's what TMZ does. Um, I think the timing of it is interesting, because even though TMZ's been trash to Britney for so long, and seeing them report in this way is so reminiscent of 2007, the beginning of 2008. Definitely, it reminds almost everyone of that. Um, I think I think these are important bookends for us to consider, because what happened in between was the conservatorship. And while TMZ has never been kind to Britney, during the conservatorship, they were a lot softer on Britney, a lot more positive with Britney. Um, and I think we should ask why. And it's just kind of obvious that there's been so many allegations of Jamie and Larry and other members of Britney's team just working with TMZ. And so now that Britney's, away from that, and, she's really calling out a lot of people, I think they're just up to their same old tricks, is just what I think. TMZ will play ball with whoever pays, and Britney's profitable.
Yeah, yeah, I agree. I think TMZ underestimated the general public. They thought this type of ableist reporting would still work. Um, it did work to an extent, obviously. Even some of the fans got worried.
Yeah, TMZ, part of me questions, did they underestimate the public response, or is it irrelevant to them? Because even though a lot of people are supporting Britney, how many people who are supporting Britney clicked on that TMZ article and clicked on that video? And whether
Yeah.
you came there to defend Britney or to judge Britney, and sometimes people, if they're honest, it's a little combination of both. There's a lot of people who wanted to defend Britney, but also wanted to watch the video themselves so they could judge. Let's see if this is manic. Do I think this is manic? There's a lot of armchair psychiatry that goes on. And it doesn't matter whether you support Britney or not. Those clicks pay TMZ. And so I think a lot of these think pieces and talking about, have we learned, nothing, or we've changed or whatnot? I don't know. I recently was watching a documentary about Princess Diana, and people were saying the same things that we are saying about this Britney situation with the restaurant as with Diana. Like, oh, like now we'll know, like the press knows better. We'll know to hold the press accountable. And we should know not to buy these trash magazines because we're generating a lot of the demand. And, this or that. And like 10 years later, after Diana died, Britney was being chased by the press the same way. Um, so I feel a bit pessimistic, but I don't know. I don't think it's a matter of knowing better or learning more. I think people do know. I think they know in your heart. You don't have to know the nuances of psychiatry or trauma to know that chasing someone like that and invading people's privacy like that isn't healthy. Um, I don't think it's a matter of learning. I think it's a matter of doing and changing. And that's hard for people. I think that's a lot of the crux of it. And yeah, expecting people to address their own ableism and how they feel about words like mania and the history of that word. That's even more work required of people. So
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, I mean, if people are claiming that they've learned, right, then why were they stigmatizing bipolar and why were they pulling out articles of Jamie Lynn with the flailing a knife with a headline that was kind of calling her a badass and saying, "Oh, why was she called badass rather than a maniac?" So to answer your question, I don't feel like people have learned at all because that's where their mindset is at. I think what they mean to say is that they learned to not harass Britney, or they wish people would learn to not harass Britney, and that's where the issue is. That kind of becomes centered around Britney only when it should be centered around the well-being of disabled people and the general discourse around that. There's no need to imply that manic people are just like walking around with a knife, because to me that's the implication. That's what you're saying. You're saying that manic people are violent when you do that comparison. And I know they are well intended. I know the intention, the real intention is to show the hypocrisy of TMZ reporting on Jamie Lynn versus Britney. But we know that. We know that. We know they have an agenda. We know that. There's no need to point it out and spell it out like that. And in the process throw disabled people under the bus. Because in the end, we've said this before, impact over intention.
yeah, absolutely. I I don't like that the Jamie Lynn swinging the knife situation comes up always whenever people want to have kind of a clapback moment when the press talks about or touches on Britney's mental health or like diagnosis history in any way. I think it's really problematic. And yeah, it just throws people under the bus, and there's just no need for that. And part of the reason too why Jamie Lynn got a decent treatment with that article is that her team is in bed with TMZ. Her managers, her people, they cooperate with TMZ. They work with TMZ.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. They are in touch with TMZ, as they should be, honestly. Like if you have a good publicist and a good PR team, even though these media outlets are horrible, what media outlet isn't horrible? And that's the thing. Sam Asghari was framed as someone who was a non-supportive husband who stormed out when things got a bit too much. And obviously, all the racist fans were relishing in that discussion. And it seems like Britney, her business manager Kate Hudson, and her attorney Matthew Rosengart aren't doing anything to combat any of the media smear campaigns. So Sam Asghari contacted TMZ, or they bumped into him. I don't know. It seems orchestrated to me, but that's besides the point. Basically, there was a video of him that was filmed by TMZ, and he was clarifying that people were being disrespectful. They were filming Britney while she was trying to have her meal, and so they kind of had to leave. And he left before her to get the car, and a lot of fans were attacking him because he spoke to TMZ as if like that's like a huge problem. And to me, Britney doesn't have a team that's doing anything clever with handling her image and the PR and in the media and whatnot. So he had to do what he had to do. Um,
This is what a lot
yeah.
of celebrities choose to go in this route of working
Uh
with
huh.
the press. And then some
Yeah.
celebrities who don't work with the press, there can be problems. Or there's celebrities who may choose not to work with the press, but the press knows not to mess with them because this celebrity has had a team that has sent cease and desist, has like made it
Mm-hmm.
difficult for the media
Mm-hmm.
outlet to report certain things. And of course, you can't go after every single thing. There's just too many. But the big ones and the
Mm-hmm.
ones that are they basically, if you don't make it clear that you're not going to let the press bully you and just print whatever you want, whatever they will see you as vulnerable and they will go after you. And so it does
Yeah.
make me question um you know how how much liberty does TMZ feel that they can take with Britney? Because I would think that like she has Matthew Rosengart, he's a big Hollywood attorney, that should have some protection behind it. TMZ shouldn't feel comfortable posting a potentially manipulated video about Britney
Mm-hmm.
and using diagnostic terms in the headlines about her.
Yeah.
They should
Yeah.
Her attorney should not make them feel comfortable to do that.
Exactly. Just like his attorney should not let Lou Taylor, Robin, and them feel comfortable going to events and thriving and continuing on with their careers as if nothing had happened. But that's for another conversation. Yeah, but people kept fixating on Sam Asghari giving TMZ paparazzis an exclusive, and he shouldn't be doing that. And I'm like, well, I pulled out an old article from 2008 where New York Times were basically fueling the stuff about Britney. The headline says, "In the drama of Britney Spears, a show business fortune is at risk. A custody battle has tarnished the Britney Spears brand." So there's this like, in this article, they were adding to that narrative of Britney not being able to handle her money, her assets, everything is a mess, everything is chaotic. They were adding to that narrative. So how come fans were okay with New York Times, the same media outlet who did this back in the day? How come they were okay with them doing a documentary? And some of them continue to defend it even after Britney herself said that she hates these documentaries. So to me, that was just like an interesting perspective of like they kind of pick and choose, you know?
Yeah, I think TMZ, and this is in no way a defense of TMZ, they're awful. I think they're just the most obviously and blatantly awful. And
Yeah,
unfortunately, they're some of the most well connected. I think it's quite obvious that TMZ has connections with police departments and first responders. They honestly have information before major news outlets. Um, the connections are gross, and I mean, what do we do about this? What do you do about this nasty little network like this? This is similar to the this is just like the American version of like the royal rota that like Harry and Meghan were battling in the UK, of just like, what do you
yeah,
do with this insidious symbiotic relationship of just grossness, like built on selling other people's pain and profiting from that. I don't know. And one strategy is playing ball with them to some extent, and playing ball meaning
Yeah.
like, hey, you know what? I'll talk to you, and give you my side of the story of what happened. I'll do that. Like you
Mm-hmm.
can work with there's a lot of different ways that celebrities can interact and work with news outlets. It doesn't always mean that they're like selling stories about other people. I mean, that's what like where the nasty work comes in, of like selling stories
Yeah.
like that. But people using TMZ to get their side of the story across, it's honestly a strategy that it makes sense, especially for today. Like
Mm-hmm.
that's a good way to get it across in a different way. Unfortunately, like just posting on your Instagram, that's just one way, and it's a way that not a lot of people take seriously. Even though TMZ is a tabloid, a lot of people look at it as a credible news source because they are some of the first people to report on this stuff.
Yeah, yeah, and the thing is, the media in general is such a huge propaganda tool, especially in America, and specifically tabloids. It's such a toxic business, and I think it's because America as a country like relies on celebrity culture as part of their economy. It's a touristic attraction. It's part of that business model. So, they're always going to dehumanize celebrities no matter what. So I don't think this is like exclusive to Britney, but I also think with her, because of the history and obviously currently the lack of having a good team, a diligent team, they view her as someone that's easy to prey on, and they're always going to take that opportunity.
That's what like Harry said, that in his book and in their documentary, Harry and Meghan. I know this isn't about Harry and Meghan, but it's just I keep thinking about it because he had so much focus about the press and the relationships that the press has. But he had pointed out that when the palace made it clear that they weren't going to defend Meghan, it gave a clear signal to the press that they could do whatever they wanted. They could report on her however they wanted, and there wouldn't be any repercussions. And so if you don't have that support, if you don't have that like shield of like, no, if you post whatever you want or you report whatever you want, there's gonna be a problem. I'm going to make things difficult for you. That adjusts things. That changes things.
On the other hand, there was some, I guess, positive reporting on the situation. Um, Pop Crush posted an article. The headline is basically Britney Spears leaves LA restaurant after patrons refuse to stop recording her. Obviously, that is a positive step forward. The author of this article tweeted, "My Britney Spears article is going viral. I hate irresponsible and just blatantly false journalism." And I saw the article. It was okay. But there was no mention of the ableism of it all. There's no mention of how we shouldn't be throwing these words and furthering the stigma. So to me, that's not good enough. I'm tired of people settling for crumbs when it comes to the media. And I'm tired of these journalists basically wanting to take credit for quote unquote doing the right thing. And to me, it's like I appreciate the effort, but this is baseline knowledge. People claim that they've learned. So if you feel like you've learned, then why do you want credit for doing something that's so baseline? So I don't know. It's just really frustrating. I think people just are so desperate for any like positive reporting that they keep praising these positive articles, and they need to understand that these media outlets that are on the other end of the spectrum are still profiting. This whole thing is just like the way these positive articles are working kind of reminds me of the documentaries coming out. Like people basically had to indulge in trauma porn to be able to shift directions and do things differently. And now it's like, yeah, the tides have turned with the general public, and that's why these journalists, some of them are adjusting their content. In the end, it is money driven, and all these micro journalists just want, they want to gather woke points to further their careers. And at the end of the day, like I said earlier, none of these good articles centered disability rights. And to me, that's the problem, because that's what TMZ and others are causing harm against. It's the disability community, in my opinion.
Completely. And that's it's part of the problem is even though these articles are positive, it just kind of basically comes from this crux of essentially a more elaborate and more eloquent leave Britney alone. Um,
Mm-hmm.
there's no real further discussion of, hey, maybe we shouldn't let the word mania rile us up, because it just sets us up for the potential of, okay, what if a celebrity is acting manic? Um, I don't really think
Mm-hmm.
anyone is qualified to determine if someone's manic aside from the person themselves, because what can be labeled as manic? Don't even get me started. And like honestly, whew, side note, I have a lot of psychiatric trauma, um, of misdiagnoses and misdiagnoses, yeah, whatever the plural of that is. That I've
Mm-hmm.
had a long history of that. It was a really long, like over a decade of a lot of struggle with that. Maybe someday I'll talk about it. Personally, I don't want to talk, like I don't want to talk about it now. Um, because it's besides the point. But it's just to say that what can be described as manic and mania, and really the history of misunderstanding that, it's so sad, uh, because once that label is put on someone, um, it's kind of all people see. And even if someone it is someone who like can experience mania, even if they themselves are like, yeah, I can experience mania, because it ends up being like anytime someone like exhibits like a lot of joy or enthusiasm, or just like sadness or anything that's deemed as quote unquote intense, will get labeled as mania real quick. And it's just that, like, even if someone does sometimes experience mania, it's never makes sense to describe it like that. It's better to describe it as actually what is happening. Like,
Yeah.
like saying like, oh, this
Yeah.
person was shifting from side to side very fast, or they
Mm-hmm.
were they were speaking very rapidly, or they continued to ask questions about this, or you should say exactly what is actually happening, rather than put it on of just mania. And that's in no way to like shy a word away from the word mania. It's just it's
I'll present an example. Like, let's imagine a scenario, right? Now, just to be clear, I don't like Jamie Lynn's raggedy ass. I think she's awful, and I think she's an abuser. But for the sake of this discussion, what if Jamie Lynn was having what is perceived to be a manic episode in public? How are Britney fans going to feel about that? Are they going to mock her? Probably. Are they going to justify paparazzi taking videos of her, calling her manic? Probably. That's where we're at, and that's what upsets me. Because to me, what message would this be sending? There are so many ways to critique individuals for being awful. But to me, when it becomes at the expense of regressing discussions on mental illness and disabilities, then I don't really support that, you know?
No, the Jamie Lynn example of when people show her with the knife, that is so disheartening to see that come up every time mental health discussions come up in the
Mm-hmm.
Britney fandom, because it really reinforces this stigma and falsity of
Mm-hmm.
mental illness being dangerous. When statistically people who have mental illness are more likely to be victims of violence than to perpetrate violence. But
Yeah.
this stigma is a huge reason why so many people, you know, in quote unquote treatment centers are manually restrained, are chemically restrained, charted on all the time, surveilled, watched all the time. It's a huge reason why so many disabled people are killed by the police. And this is the danger of posting stuff like this. Like it's not as simple, it's not as meaningless of like, oh, we're taking some jabs at Jamie Lynn. Like, no, we're showing a long history of established
Yeah.
ableism coming through. And honestly, the Jamie Lynn knife situation, I just, everyone who makes a big deal out of that, I just feel it shows that they've never gotten in a fight. Like I it's like I just grew up really country. I grew up so rural. And that's a video of her trying to get a bunch of drunk hicks to calm down. And like, honestly, been there. I didn't use a knife, I used a bat. But I mean, it happens. Like, sometimes you have to threaten the drunks to get them to calm down, to stop fighting. And I think that's all it is. And, but like, and trying to put this on, mania, it's just so regressive, and that's not helpful to Britney, that's not helpful to the disability community at large. I really wish we would stop that.
Yeah, this type of stigma is the reason Britney was placed in a conservatorship to begin with. It's the reason the media was able to normalize the conservatorship and lead the public and the world to believe that she needed it. Yeah, and if you're someone who was against that and you fought for the conservatorship to end, and some people are like getting into like discussions on abolition with conservatorships, including us. But if we can't interrogate our own ableism and stop furthering the stigma, then how is the media going to stop hounding Britney the way TMZ just did a few days ago?
Part of abolishing conservatorships is also abolishing the psychiatrist in your head,
Yeah.
abolishing the concept of psychiatry having authority in this situation, because we
Mm-hmm.
know historically psychiatry has been used forever to control people. And me being saying that, of saying how psychiatry is a means of control, is in no way dismissing neurodivergence, mental illness, the very real reality of disability. These things are two different things. And I think there's still this layer and a lot in the fandom of like watching Britney, assessing Britney, like, oh, is she manic? Is she? No, 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 she's not manic. Okay, now we can defend her. But what happens if Britney actually was manic?
Yeah, exactly. Just like we've before talked about, what if Britney's disabled? What if she's neurodivergent herself? You know? Obviously, that's not our place to assess or to like even get into in depth. That's not what I'm getting at. But like, what if your favorite pop star is disabled? How are you gonna feel about that? Are you gonna justify the conservatorship?
Exactly. It's really, really putting yourself on shaky ground if your whole support is based on no, she's not disabled, no, she's not mentally ill, and that's that. Um,
Mm-hmm.
that no, it should be, it's irrelevant what's going on with Brittany. I don't need to know anything. It's irrelevant because I support her autonomy no matter her diagnosis. If there's a diagnosis, we're not even getting into that. It's besides the point. It's that there's no diagnosis in the world that would justify her not having access to all of her human rights. So let's quit, always having this knee jerk reaction of just like, no, she's not manic. This is manic. And then showing an example of something that isn't mania. And even if you had an example of mania, it wouldn't be appropriate for people to be like posting that. And also people don't even really understand mania or know what it looks like. I guarantee every single person has seen mania in front of them and not known it. sometimes, because mania can look so different, and like certain mania is rewarded, right? Like if somebody is actually manic and just grinding out the hours at work, like, pulling a double and like getting so much done, people don't deem that as manic. They deem that as hustling. It's grinding, so. And why TMZ felt the need to potentially reverse this video and make it sound gibberishy, this is really just igniting a lot of what people have a concept of what they think is mania. Um, and mania can look really different. And honestly, anyone with a brain can experience mania. Uh,
Yeah.
so I wish we would kind of quit seeing this as something like, oh, only if you are blank, if you're whatever, then you can experience that. And we don't know with Britney, so we got to keep an eye. So I don't like that.
Yeah, the whole situation and the way it unfolded with the way people were kind of standing up for Britney. Again, I know they're well intended, but it just proved to me that they have really learned nothing. When they say, "Have we not learned anything? Has the media not learned anything? Have the people not learned anything?" You have learned nothing, because a few people, like a few fans and a few people that are in the Twitter sphere of it all, were tweeting and messaging me privately as well, telling me that they're really hurt by the whole discussion around that. There are people who have been in manic episodes, people who have survived psychosis. They're looking at this and they're like, "What is going on?" Like, I feel like I'm thrown under the bus. Basically, is what happened. Um, Anyway, back to Britney. Now we know this clip is reversed and it's tampered with, allegedly. So to me, that means that, because initially I was asking, right? I was like, okay, well, Kate Hudson is an awful business manager, also an awful person, but that's just my opinion that I'll reserve to myself, um, because of all the allegations and whatnot. He's not doing anything. So what about Matthew Rosengart? Since he's so concerned with wanting to look good these days, why doesn't he take legal action against TMZ and not charge Britney? Because, like, I've suggested that he takes legal action. Someone told me that, oh, Britney's already paying too much for the, lawsuit with Jamie and whatnot. I'm like, why doesn't he do it for free? And then also, someone else argued that TMZ basically covered their ass by saying that this is what people were telling them. So, legally they're okay legally. And I'm just like, ugh, I don't understand how the law works in America. That's like, it's awful. But now that we know potentially the clip is reversed, does that mean that Rosengart can have a legal argument against them? Does that mean that he can prove that this was published by TMZ in bad faith, and take legal action, maybe a cease and desist letter, whatever?
And even if he didn't go after them legally for this moment, he could definitely just even send an email or and make it clear that, hey guys, we're not going to do that again. There's going to be problems if we do this again. I'm not saying that necessarily works, but
Mm-hmm.
doing nothing, like saying nothing and expecting the press to go away when they can make money off of you, it's just not going to happen. It's not a problem you can ignore.
Exactly. Another thing that bothers me as well, we've talked before about Rosengart, basically in court documents, stating that the conservatorship was beneficial in the beginning and that Jamie should have stopped there. I recently talked about how, like, on my Twitter, I talked about how this sort of messaging does not really align with conservatorship abolition. It doesn't align with disability rights. And a few people were telling me that this isn't really Rosengart's fight. And I'm like, I started to notice that I get combated a lot with that excuse for different topics, not just Rosengart. So, like, with the journalists that are publishing these positive reports about Britney's situation in the restaurant, they're telling me that it's not their fight, it's not their job to educate people on disability rights and ableism. It's not for them to do. And I'm like, well, you've made it clear that you don't care about disabled people in the disability community at large, but you care about Britney, right? So don't you think that should, just like to protect her, that should be part of the narrative, part of the rhetoric, part of their reporting? It's just like, I don't understand what's not clicking with them.
Yeah, and that's also acting as if these journalists haven't spoken to disabled people about how a lot of this language is hurtful beyond Brittany. I know I personally talked to a few of these journalists about this, of how this is
Yeah,
so beyond Brittany. They know, and they choose not to have that be part of the reporting. And honestly, it doesn't even have to come from a complete educational background, because I know that a lot of journalists don't have the credentials to educate. But even just including the perspective and a direct quote from someone goes a long way. Um, it's not fair to put this education on survivors, because like I consider what I went through with psychiatry minimal compared to what other people have gone through. And I don't have it in me to get into this discussion. I tried to some extent in 2020 when Free Britney was really going hard.
yeah,
Um, I'm a bit burnt out on it. It feels a little too vulnerable, especially when, it is it does feel like you expose a lot of your vulnerability, you're really raw about these stories, and then people just turn around and regurgitate extremely ableist sanist language right after, and it really is like, wow, nothing has really been learned, and now I just feel um super vulnerable, extra vulnerable. And I know that a
yeah.
lot of people are feeling that way in the fandom, a lot of people.
Mm-hmm.
And so
Yep.
it's unfortunate that so many people are being silenced in that way, because we're just too tired.
Yeah. All these journalists that are bragging about their good articles going viral, and that's an example of good, noble journalism, um, then why don't they center this conversation and this educational opportunity around those that are harmed the most? Not just Britney, you know? Um,
Yeah, there's been a lot of fans who have been very open that a lot of their connection with Britney is the connection of mental health struggles. It's there, there's a ton of psych survivors who are Britney fans. There's a lot of stories to be told, with people's consent, if they're okay with it, the people who are comfortable. Um, I don't think see it really going there. It's still just coming this, just of shielding Britney. And I agree. Britney should be protected, but I believe it. I say that in the sense of Britney and everyone at large should be protected. When it continues to be this perspective of focusing on Britney so much, um, that actually comes to her own detriment.
yeah, I don't think she can be protected if everyone else is thrown under the bus. I really don't. It's just gonna keep, the cycle is just gonna keep repeating itself, you know? I was approached by the media back when, I think when Free Britney was still happening, obviously. I was approached by one of the documentaries, and I was extremely hesitant. I've never felt comfortable with the idea of these documentaries being made without Britney's consent, regardless of whether we can get her consent or not. That still doesn't justify doing them, right? So I approached people who we knew at the time worked with documentaries, and I was like, hey, listen, I was approached by this network and they want me to talk about Britney's situation and Free Britney and whatnot. Should I do it? I don't know. I'm hesitant. We aren't getting Britney's consent. And I was encouraged to do it, and I was like, I don't know. So I was very hesitant, and then in the end, I was like, you know what? If I'm gonna put myself out there, which I was extremely uncomfortable with, um, I'll make it worthwhile. So I recorded a video of myself talking about obviously how Britney's conservatorship should end entirely and that it shouldn't have happened to begin with. And I talked about how this should be centered around disability rights. And that's it. That was my contribution. And I submitted the clip. And obviously it was never used because that didn't fit the narrative of any of the documentaries. And I feel like if at least one documentary took that route and made the whole discussion centered around disability rights and not so much about showing images of Britney being traumatized and just like, reinforcing all of this BS, Britney would have liked that documentary, you know?
Right. It's not like Britney got mad about, the Dirty Money documentary or Guardians Inc., and because those were documentaries about conservatorship abuse at large and how it works, the system of it, the
Yep,
mechanics of it all.
yep. And how they target the elderly and disabled people. That was the main topic, yeah.
Yeah. And yeah, Britney was never upset about those. And honestly, those actually explained how Britney got into the conservatorship more than any of the documentaries that were allegedly about her.
Yeah, and the reason I mentioned this example is because just to sort of like showcase how, in the end, when the media is working on a report, on a documentary, on an article, whatever, there's always a narrative that they have to follow. And people seem to just accept that and view it as like a normal thing when it's literally just for profit. It's the way it is because they want to make money. And my ass talking about disability rights isn't going to make money for them when Free Britney and Britney Spears conservatorship was the hot topic at the time, right? So it's still very exploitative. So, you know, people deem the Britney documentaries to be like a positive representation of the whole situation, and she herself doesn't agree. So,
Yeah, it's definitely always for profit. And unfortunately, a huge reason why it's profitable is because it's what people want. It's what a lot of people want. Or even if they don't want it, a lot of online quote unquote journalism has shifted into outrage journalism, because it just still generates the clicks, even, whether you're there because you want to judge or you're there because you like are
yeah,
outraged. It doesn't matter. They're still getting the clicks.
the consumption is still there.
And that's what I think people are still just like really disconnecting from. Um, and I think a big part of it is, unfortunately, on some level, it's because people feel entitled to view these things, even if they know that they shouldn't, even if they're like in the same breath saying this shouldn't have been filmed, that Britney should have her privacy. So many people watched it and made money for it. But like people do feel entitled to celebs' privacy to a certain extent. They feel that it's part of the celebrity's job. It's something that they signed up for. And I think that's honestly another layer of this that needs to be confronted if we want to untangle some of this toxicity.
Yeah, I mean, again, this is largely because of the way things are in America, honestly. Someone from Brazil was messaging me about all of this and explaining to me how the law works in Brazil in terms of privacy and celebrity culture and whatnot. None of this is allowed. And I live in the Arab world, and none of this is legal here either. Celebrities are not treated as a commodity. They're still equal to other people, and they get the same protections as other people. That's why Lindsay Lohan moved to Dubai, I think.
Celebrities get different protection when they go to other countries because those other countries actually give their civilians decent protection too. That's the problem with the United States too. It's not just celebrities whose privacy are completely violated. We don't have enough time to get into the sheer violation of data collection and surveillance that happens to US citizens that they don't think twice about. They don't even think of it as something that is a violation, where in other countries this is completely illegal. And that's an important layer to this is celebrity culture in the United States upholds a larger problem of condoning surveillance.
Yeah, and recently I'm seeing a lot of people praise that guy from the former employee of Black Box Security for, stepping out and revealing some truths about how they spied on Britney. And I'm like, I just got super frustrated because, like, in the end, he worked for an Israeli surveillance firm that spied on Britney and probably on other people and probably like on a governmental level as well. And it's like, mm-hmm,
Israel and the United States are completely in bed with each other on surveillance
of
and
course.
military equipment in general. It like
Yeah.
was shocking zero that so much of the surveillance operation around Britney was largely isn't really. So
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And it's like, to me, that guy, like, the fact that he worked for an Israeli surveillance firm makes him inherently trash. I don't care that he stepped out and spoke out for Britney. I don't care. I don't care. And as if that is being utilized. Maybe soon, but it hasn't been utilized in court for such a long time. So I digress.
I mean, yeah, US citizens at large have definitely been conditioned to accept a lot of violations of their privacy. And so I think that's definitely a part of the conversation here with the hyper celebrity culture in the United States. On some level, all of us feel violated and spied on. And that's continuing. What's interesting is I feel that as more people, have phones and cameras in their pocket at all times, and more people are filming things at all times, more average, just everyday people are starting to get a tiny taste of what it's like to have their privacy violated, like celebrities. For example, there's so many videos or pictures of people that other people have taken of total strangers, and the person has no idea that they're being filmed or that their photo was taken at all, and it gets uploaded to the internet, and usually it's mocked or made fun of or judged, and it's just awful. And
Yeah.
that's not something that happened until more recently. And so it's starting to be a thing, and also like with more people being their own like content creators and having public accounts. I just noticed I never had a public account until um I had joined Free Britney. I had my private, like, personal account, and then I had like a professional account for something else, but it's like it was professional, which is also different. But I've noticed if you have like a public content consumption account of some sort, people really treat you quite differently with their interactions. Um, there's a huge layer of like baseline respect is just completely removed, and it's just kind of thought of like you're the one who has your account be public. You should have to take whatever abuse is hurled your way. Celebrities obviously get that treatment on such a much more like exponential magnetized level of it's part of your job. That's just the deal. You signed up for it. Um, and it's gross because it comes with this idea of if you give me what I want from you, if I can use you for what I want in these ways, you just have to accept all the ways I want to use you. The ways you give, they're not good enough. Like I'm gonna always demand more. And I'm not wanting to get totally deeper into this because it's a bigger conversation. But I think if you read between the lines of what I'm saying, you understand that this is a larger problem with a different type of culture we have embedded in our society. And I think it really shows itself with this idea of this is what you signed up for.
Yeah, definitely. I think this whole thing started like in the 2010s. Um, I'm talking like at a smaller scale, like regular people, um, of like people just taking pictures and videos of others and publishing them comfortably. And even if it's not like a targeted, I'm taking a photo of you, they'd be filming themselves and showing everyone in the background. And I'm pretty sure there's a video of me somewhere online in someone's background, you know? Like and I hate the thought of that. I hate that I don't have agency over that. I hate it. And one time I was on vacation in the US years ago. That was like way before the pandemic. I think it was 2014 or 15. Um, and it was like an extended vacation. And I visited several places, and one of them was LA. And I had joined a gym, so I was working out, and they had a photographer. I guess was maybe taking pictures for like content or for ads. I don't know. And I noticed that they were coming my way and started taking pictures of me and several people around me as like part of their project. And I kind of like stopped, and I'm like, what is going on? So I abruptly stopped in a way that made them kind of like they were a bit taken aback. I kind of dropped my dumbbells, and I was like, what are you doing? And they were like, oh, we're just taking pictures for the website. And I was like, you need to ask for my permission. You can't just take pictures of me and post them on your website. And apparently that's not illegal there. So I was like, okay, well, please don't. And they were nice. They weren't resistant or anything. They were just like, sorry, we're not going to do that. And they waited for me to finish, and then they continued doing it. But still, like, it just like it's ingrained in their mentality that this is like totally okay.
Yeah, and it's also surprising that anyone wouldn't want to be photographed, right?
Hmm.
It's the idea of like everyone just wanting that. And that brings on another layer of like celebrity children and how
Oh yeah.
they get photographed all the time. And somehow it's okay. But yet, I remember when I was little that my mom had to sign a permission slip for the school to be able to use any photos of me, in the yearbook or the school newsletter or whatever. They had to get people's permission. And not every kid's parent signed that permission. Not, some of them were like, no, you don't have permission. You can't post my kid. I find it odd that, like, why is there a loophole of why can celebrity children be photographed and that's totally legal? I know Blake Lively is a big advocate against that and really outspoken about, there shouldn't be photos of kids. And she's just really open about how it scares her children so much. And I think it's going to be really interesting uh, as a lot of these celebrity kids get older and once they're old enough and adults to start telling their story more. We're starting to see that already with some kids. I know some of the kids from the show Kate and 8 plus, or what is it? How does that go? Kate plus 8, John and Kate plus 8, the couple who had like the sextuplets, and they also had the twins. They just had like a bunch of
Right.
kids. It's hard to keep track of all the different reality shows there was of like basically like reproduction. Um, but these kids were like a multiple birth story, and they were filmed from a really young age, and basically like the family was broken up, and the kids largely think that like so much of the family was so dysfunctional, and their parents relationship broke up was because of the cameras, and how like the cameras have just like really changed his mom and all that, and it ruined so much. And that's just, he's 18 now. So I, I really think we're going to start seeing a wave of these stories. And we've heard stories like this before of like basically every kid who was thrown on a reality show, or, now we have like all these social media accounts that are just children. um it's going to be really, I don't even know the word. It's going to be really sad and creepy when all of those kids become adults and start speaking more. Yeah, and we're going to act like, oh, now we know better. We always knew. We knew it wasn't healthy. We've been exposing kids
Yeah,
on camera
yeah.
forever. We knew it wasn't healthy what happened to, like, who is it? Like Jackie Cooper and Shirley Temple and Judy Garland and all those kids. It just kept going forever. The Coreys, like it's never stopped. And what's sad is it's expanding. It's not just Hollywood now. Now you're seeing it go into everyday homes. Um and that's, another type of surveillance, but we call it content.
Kind of like all these family channels on YouTube, basically. A lot of them have taken a wrong turn already. So I can only imagine when these kids are adults, what would happen. A few years ago, I used to work in a PR/branding agency. And at the time, at least here, it was, the rise of social media influencing and this idea of like us having clients who want to hire influencers through like a third party agency to promote their product, right? So we'd contact these agencies who have all these influencers signed with them as their sort of like managers to mediate and create the content and promote or whatever. Anyway, so one of the agencies that was more popular than others, their contract sheets leaked to all other agencies, including ours. So we got a copy of it. And one of the major influencers back then, she was like the most famous back then, right? Um, she had just gotten pregnant at the time. She had just announced her pregnancy. And in the contract, I saw that she already created a contract for her unborn child with all these business deals with diaper brands and like bottles, baby bottles, and like just baby products in general, already signed and paid for. They're just waiting for the baby to come to the world, you know? And the baby was born eventually and had their own account. And to this day, it's running. Like, I think the baby is like a preteen now, or maybe like not a preteen. I think they're a child now. And they're using the baby to promote child products. And there's a market for it. And, you know, so it's just awful, honestly. Like, what is that child gonna feel like when they're an adult seeing all of this? Like, imagine you just like when you're an adult, you realize that suddenly that like there's so much content on the internet of you just being commodified, right?
It's disgusting, and I think it's something that people need to interrogate more. I honestly am just like so grossed out by like child content creators. You know, I'm not saying all of them it's creepy and exploitative, because I understand that it's a different generation, having doing things online is a part of life for a lot of kids. And like that's life has changed in that respect. If you and I were growing up and today, we probably would be wanting to do YouTube videos or TikToks or stuff, too. Um, but I think it's really clear when you can see some of these accounts, this is just not kids having funsies on the internet. Like, this is a proper business. And I mean, then also, like, how do you even draw that line? I don't know. It's kind of weird how many kids are on the internet. I feel like I sound old saying that because, like, I understand it's like such a daily part of life. But I do think it's dangerous. Like, you wouldn't just let kids like run around wherever on their own, like out in public, and that's what it's like on the internet.
Yeah, I mean, I don't care if I sound old. I don't care if I am being old. Honestly, I still haven't fully coped with the normalization of selfie taking and TikToks and just seeing people in public lift their phones and take videos, and me having to sort of like scurry away and find a way to not show up in their frame. I don't like that, you know? I don't like having to be subjected to that. Or seeing people filming a TikTok dance. Like, I stan the dance, but like, do it in a way where like people aren't showing in the background, you know?
This is something that people need to start thinking about more. I don't know. And as far as what is going to be done about the press with their continued going after celebs, I don't know what's to be done with that. I I wonder why a bunch of celebrities don't get together and like pool their resources together, like get the best lawyers, put their money together, get some legislators and push for something to have like better privacy, for better protection for them, because this is an issue that is so publicly and obviously like a celebrity issue. But it is impacting more and more everyday people. um I don't know, but then yeah, it makes me question of if we do that, there would probably be a lot of pushback, because legislation like that would be probably in direct conflict with a lot of current surveillance that's happening on US citizens at large, whether they realize it or not.
Yeah. Yeah, and even if they set up rules and regulations with like celebrities, right? Like to me, the only place it's acceptable to take pictures of celebrities is at a premiere or an award show where like that's part of it. You go there knowing that's going to happen. To me, that should be like the only way it's allowed. But they're not going to do that.
Yeah, like if a celebrity is performing, or if they're on a red carpet, or it's an official work event, like these are all times when it makes sense to take photos of celebrities, even if they're candid photos that the celebrity isn't aware of, because they know they're at a work event. They just know. It's totally different than like trying to take a picture of a celebrity as they're eating a meal in a restaurant. Like two completely different things.
Yeah, they're just not going to do that. They're not going to set any rules and regulations because, like I said earlier, like celebrity culture is such a huge part of the U.S. and it's a source of income for the country, for the government, for businesses, individuals, all of it. Just like they're not gonna get rid of conservatorships because that's also a huge source of income for the country.
Yeah, I do think that the continued focus and centering of Brittany in this conversation is definitely intentional to kind of like distract from the multi like billion-dollar industry that is conservatorships in general. Um, yeah, and I find it interesting that there's a lot of that language coming forward of trying to uh, undo some of the damage that has been to the reputation of conservatorships, of acting like, oh well, sometimes they're good and whatnot. Like there's been real subtle little moments that they're trying to fix that. Like recently our friend Jesse clocked a moment in the new Gossip Girl.
Oh yeah. Yeah, yeah.
How did that go? It was something about how one of the characters, their dad, I haven't watched the new Gossip Girl. I watched the old one. I'm not going to watch the new one, but anyway. Um, one of the characters, their father had been put in a conservatorship because he was mentally ill, I guess, and I think he was spending a lot of money or something. I'm not totally sure. Um, but the idea was that he had to be like put into treatment and whatnot. And when um, someone approached the character, like asking her, like, how's your dad doing? In the background of that was hold me closer.
Yeah. Yeah, he approached her asking her how her dad is doing and saying that all the stuff that happened was crazy. There was an emphasis on the word crazy. And Hold Me Closer, Britney Spears was playing in the background in the restaurant. And I'm just like, this is intentional. Like it's totally intentional.
Similarly to when last year when Steve-O, Bam Margera's friend, the Jackass guys,
Yeah.
when Steve-O was going around saying things like, Bam's not in a conservatorship, it's a guardianship. They're different. They're not different. They're just, these are different terms depending on what state you're in. I think what Steve-O meant was that Bam was in a temporary guardianship, like an LPS guardianship. And I think he thinks that a conservatorship is like a more permanent, like controlling money and personal and everything. Like, I think that's what he thinks the distinction is. And just side note, it seems that Bam is Bam and Steve-O recently announced that they're going to be doing some touring together. They seem to be on good terms. Bam seems to be comfortable with the direction of his recovery and what he's doing with his life. So I think any kind of continued discussion or like poking into Bam, I think is really inappropriate. Um, I'm not telling a grown man who has struggled with substance abuse and, mental illness his entire life how to conduct his recovery. Uh, I don't agree with conservatorships. I'm going to keep advocating for the abolition of conservatorships, but I can do that without prying into Bam's business. And I think that's what we all kind of need to do. But side note, that's all to say that it's really clear that this concept of a conservatorship has left like a dirty taste in people's mouth, and that they think of them as just bad. And so I think there's some damage control being done with the reputation of conservatorships in general. And part of that goes hand in hand with like, let's rehabilitate the reputation of conservatorships because they got a bad rap because all the attention Britney's case did. And it's also effective to do that by continuing to perpetuate the idea of, oh, well, look at all the reasons, quote unquote, why Britney had to be in a guardianship or conservatorship. There's definitely a lot of that going on, not to undermine the fact that I do think that there's people very much like going against Britney who have their own butts to cover.
Yeah, I mean, guess who agrees with trying to do some damage control on conservatorships? Her attorney, Matthew Rosengart. This is a direct quote. He said, "Not all conservatorships are bad." He literally said that in front of tens and tens of people who were, waiting outside the court. Um, there was a lot of press. A lot of people took videos and published it on their socials. That's that's what Britney's attorney believes. Not all conservatorships are bad. So there's definitely like an active effort by groups and individuals to sort of recover the reputation of conservatorships because like you said, they have left like a sour note and after the whole situation with Britney unfolded to the public.
And yeah, and that's why it's so important to have more centering of disability justice in these conversations. This is why it's important to for the fandom to confront their ableism and not just be like, Britney's not manic, look at Jamie Lynn, she's manic. This isn't helpful, this isn't protecting people. This doesn't help combat the smear campaign. Like, we I think part of the ongoing legacy of Free Britney is obviously, Britney got out of the conservatorship, and so, mission accomplished in that respect. I think to keep it ongoing is to keep having to combat any narrative or ideas that it ever should have happened, and that, oh, it should happen to other people.
Exactly.
That's part of, we got to block that has to be part of the legacy, because that's another way that there can be, quote unquote, justice for Britney and justice for people at large. uh you know who knows what's going to happen in her court case. um Best of luck with that. It just, the courtroom is not a good place for survivors of abuse. And I think the best way that we can really be there for survivors of this and make sure that this doesn't happen again is combat this in a different way than what we have been doing. We say we've haven't we learned, or we know better now? Let's actually start implementing that.
Exactly.
Alright, so the best thing about the TMZ video, to me personally, I'm starving, was the pasta. What if I jump from one table to the next in the video and I ate the pasta? Would it be hot?
Like a cat.
Yeah, I got what I wanted.